The last train. Martha had been running late all day. The meetings had dragged on, the traffic was unbearable, and when she finally arrived at the station, she saw the train she usually took pulling away in the distance. Frustrated, she checked the schedule and realized she'd have to catch the last train of the night, which was due in 20 minutes. The station was quiet, the only sound being the occasional echo of footsteps and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. The air was colder than usual, and Martha shivered as she waited. When the last train finally arrived, it was almost entirely empty. She climbed aboard, grateful to find a seat in one of the few occupied cars. As she settled in, she noticed something odd. Despite the train's modern exterior, the interior had an old-fashioned ambiance. The seats were upholstered in faded velvet, and brass fixtures adorned the walls. The overhead lights were dim, casting long shadows across the aisle. Martha shrugged it off and tried to relax, but a sense of unease crept over her. The train seemed to groan and shudder as if it were an ancient machine reluctant to move. The occasional flicker of the lights added to her discomfort. Suddenly, the train came to a halt at a station Martha didn't recognize. The station was bathed in an eerie, flickering light, and the surrounding area was cloaked in thick fog. Martha glanced out the window and saw nothing but darkness beyond the station platform. The station seemed to be abandoned, with no signs of activity or any indication of where she was. The door to the car creaked open, and a conductor stepped inside. He was an elderly man with a stern face and a long, dark uniform. His eyes were sunken, with deep shadows, and they seemed to absorb the light around him. As he walked down the aisle, he checked each passenger's ticket with a cold, detached manner. When he reached Martha, he looked at her with hollow eyes and asked for her ticket. Martha's heart skipped a beat as she fumbled through her bag. She realized with growing horror that she had no recollection of buying a ticket for this train. She never remembered getting a ticket, and her wallet was empty of any recent purchases. The conductor's gaze never wavered. His voice was a low, chilling whisper.
"Last stop for you."
Martha's blood ran cold. She tried to protest, but the conductor simply nodded and moved on. As she tried to process what had just happened, the train jolted into motion again. The train moved slowly, the world outside the window becoming increasingly alien. The fog outside seemed to thicken, and the lights on the platform became tiny, flickering specks in the distance. Martha could see no signs of life or civilization. It was as if the train was traversing an endless, uncharted void. Panic set in. Martha rushed to the door of the car, only to find it locked tight. She pounded on it, but no one responded. The train continued to move through the darkness, and Martha felt a profound sense of dread. The air grew colder, and her breath became visible, misting in front of her face. The landscape outside remained unchanged, an endless, featureless expanse. No matter how far the train traveled, the view outside stayed the same, an abyss of darkness and fog. The more Martha looked, the more she felt as if she were moving away from reality itself. As the hours passed, the train seemed to slow down, though it never stopped. Martha's sense of time distorted, and exhaustion overtook her. She slumped into a seat, the realization sinking in that she might never see her home again. The fear of the unknown gnawed at her, and her thoughts became a blur of anxiety and despair. Eventually, the train's lights flickered and dimmed, casting the car into semi-darkness. The cold was almost unbearable now. Martha stared out the window, her eyes straining to find something, anything that resembled normalcy. But there was nothing, just the unending void. As the train continued on its path through the darkness, Martha's hope faded. The words of the conductor echoed in her mind, "Last stop for you." She was trapped in a realm beyond the world she knew, on a train that seemed to be bound for nowhere. Martha never saw her home again. The last train had carried her into an eternal night, a place where the boundaries of reality no longer applied, and the only certainty was the never-ending journey through the dark.